welcome back to the morning show here on Rise News. Well, we're now being joined by career economist Kelvin Emmanuel for a conversation around Nigeria's port sector and what the government of the day must do to expand the scope of making money from there for economic development. Good morning, Kelvin, and compliments of the season to you.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you so much. Compliments of the season to you, Oji and Shaitan in Lagos.
All right, you're welcome. So, Kevin, let's talk economy and raising money. This is the concern of everybody, including government. We got, of course, a feel of that from the media chat that the president had. Everything about the 2025 budget is about raising money to fund the huge allocations that have been, appropriated for or proposed for appropriation for infrastructure, for security, for health and education especially, which are going to take a good chunk of it. But then people are asking, how will the government fund this budget outside of, more borrowings, outside of taxes? There are 4 bills that the president is still talking about in terms of taxes and everything. But people are now saying, why can't you look at other areas of revenue generation, particularly the ports? Stop concentrating on Lagos, look elsewhere, consider Calabar. What are your thoughts on a general note to set the tone for this conversation when it comes to government looking beyond borrowing, looking beyond taxes, and being creative with how to generate money to fund the budget?
Steve, thank you. Very interesting question you asked. First of all, I will have to commend the Taiwo Oyedele committee that has done very fantastic work over the last 14 months on the tax bills. Very fantastic work that goes through every sector. I like to say that this is the most consequential reforms that Nigeria has seen since it got independence in 1960. And I'm very, very optimistic that the reforms, the tax bills, when they are passed, is going to raise the revenue, especially tax to GDP ratio, and is going to strengthen the fiscal structure of Nigeria. But then, to the very important question of today, I'll tell you what. Lagos is a city of about 18 to 20 million people. We don't really know our accurate census in Nigeria because, we've not had a real census in a very long time. But let's just say Lagos is a city of about 18 to 20 million, occupying 30,527 square meters, I think, which is the smallest landmass in Nigeria. It has a GDP of over $4,500 per capita, when you look at it in real times, compared to the per capita of Nigeria of about $2,520 US. The question now becomes, of the 6 different ports in Nigeria, Warri, Onne, Calabar. Calabar, by the way, was the first deep sea port in Nigeria because Calabar was the first federal capital of Nigeria. Apapa, Tinkan, how many of them are operational? How many of them are operational today? Look, Onne Seaport is designated as exploration and production for oil and gas, which means that if you're bringing any goods that is non-oil and gas cargoes, the rates that your charge is not, it makes the port uncompetitive. So if you bring a car through on there, you're going to pay more as compared to what you pay in Lagos, which means that Lagos will be the preferred seaport for bringing in cars and every other cargo. And cars, by the way, are one of the major imports Nigeria, that constitutes a share of our major imports, especially from the US, okay? Why would you not invest in raising the channel draft in Calabar? In 2006, a contract was awarded to a Dutch company to embark on rehabilitation of that seaport and to raise the channel draft. The government had issues with the company over contract variation costs, and that lingered for a long time. When the government attempted to go back to do it, the company says that you cannot, and the case was in court. In 2022, that case was taken out of court for out-of-court settlement. The immediate past MD of MPA says that, oh, they've taken the case out of court. We're going to work on raising the channel draft. The Calabar seaport is dead. Like, you barely have vessels coming there, maybe one vessel per week compared to Lagos. How do you build an economy when the smallest state by landmass that has the highest per capita income with the highest population, right, has the only functioning seaport in Nigeria, while everybody else is left to go home and dry? It doesn't make sense. This is the reason why I'm saying to the president that it is economic injustice, and Nigeria is structurally, like skewed to favor Lagos economy. And this is the basic truth. The Calabar deep seaport draft has not been done. The documents at the ICRC has been cleared for Akwa Ibom deep seaport project in Ibom. Yeah, the federal government has sat on it because if you look at the structure, 20% of the shares belongs to the federal government, 20% belongs to the state government, and 60% belongs to interested private sector investor. And that 60% was given as a 34-year concession, a PPP with Bolloré Logistics, like 2 or 3 years ago. Bolloré, the French company, ended up selling itself to MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company. Mediterranean said they are doing revalidation. Why is the federal government not putting as much effort in making sure that they start building Akwa Ibom Deep Seaport, like they did for Lekki Deep Seaport in Lekki Free Trade Zone? And now the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy is saying that they are going to, cut to investors, and they are doing drawings to see that they start the Bakassi Deep Seaport. How can Lagos have 3 functioning seaports with a 4th one in the works and every other place is languishing? How do you build an economy when everything is centered around Lagos? Is it because the Lagos establishment is afraid that if there is an operational seaport in the Eastern Maritime flank, which geographically is better for maritime operations, you're going to have diversion of port operations from the southeast, the south-south, the northeast to Akwa Ibom? Is it because they're afraid of revenue losses? It doesn't make any sense. We have to say the truth to power.
All right. Kevin, you're right. We have to say the truth to power. And thank you for doing that as well. And, yesterday you put out a series of tweets highlighting these issues regarding the Calabar seaport. But you also stated in your tweet about the fact that the Southeast is the only region in the whole of Nigeria that doesn't have a high-pressure transmission pipe for gas running through it. I'd love for you to highlight that as well. And now you've asked the federal government to decentralize port operations to the Eastern Maritime Corridor, so that the Southeast and the Northeast can benefit. Now, why do you believe that this has been so difficult to achieve?
Oji, it's interesting you ask this question. And the reason, I don't know what the Southeast Governors Forum are doing. I don't know what they discuss when they meet. But there are critical areas that we must address. And we must bring to the table as soon as possible. The Southeast, yes, is the only region that does not have a high-pressure gas transmission pipe to take natural gas through it. You have the AKK, the Ajaokuta, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano. There is a second phase of that AKK that goes to Gausu in Zamfara. Now, in that AKK, you have pressure metering and reduction stations in Gwagwalada for Abuja. You have in Kaduna, you have in Kano. And then you're also going to have in Gausu when the second phase starts. That AKK is what the government hopes to extend for transnational gas pipeline through Niger Republic to Algeria, even if I don't think that will be feasible because of the lack of diplomatic relationship between Niger Republic and the Nigerian government in Abuja. Okay? The Southeast does not have a pipe that runs through it, despite the fact that Abia State produces a lot of natural gas. In 2007, Ibe Kachuku designed Nigerian Gas Master Plan. And in that master plan, he put a 121-kilometer pipe that is supposed to extend from Aba to Owerri, to Enugu, to Onitsha, and then to Nnewi. The government says that no, they want to do a TNGP pipe extension from Abia State to Ajaokuta, and the second phase is going to go from Abia State to Enugu to Ajaokuta. That is going to take gas away from the Southeast, not through the Southeast. You need a pipe that extends out, because you need gas for glass fabrication, you need gas for urea, you need gas for power. 40% of the gas that is typically produced every day, either through associated gas that you get when you drill crude oil, yeah, or through non-associated gas fields, it's used for electricity. So how do you want to increase generation and increase feedstock to the gencos in the southeast if you don't build a high-pressure transmission pipe? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that this happens? It's the Nigerian Gas Infrastructure Company, which is a subsidiary of the NNPC Group. So my question to the management of NNPC is, why have they refused to commission FID for gas pipes to the southeast? Why have the Southeast Governors Forum not gotten into a meeting with the president to ask him why the region does not have a gas pipe that runs straight? What exactly is wrong that it seems that there is like a calculated power share between the northwest and the southwest, and until every other region in Nigeria gets permission from the northwest and the southwest, nothing happens in their region? It doesn't make any sense. How can Mr. President be talking about renewed hope and economic transformation and increase in the per capita income of Nigerians and prosperity for Nigerians, about building a $1 trillion economy, when everything is centered around Lagos? Somebody imports a 40-foot container from Guangzhou to Lagos, and it will cost him 5 or 6 million naira to truck it to Aba. And you don't expect that he's going to pass on that inflation cost to the people, considering the fact that we don't have standard gauge rail lines that extend horizontally from the southwest to the southeast. It's marginalization, economic marginalization, and we have to speak truth to power.
All right, then if I can come in here, Mr. Kevin, and you have touched on very salient points this morning. But if we focus on how to decentralize these port operations, you know, with port activities concentrated in Lagos, Nigeria is still facing issues of congestion, of inefficiency, and like you even said, increased cost of doing business, because at the end of the day, it's the consumer who bears the brunt of, you know, of what's currently happening. So when we look at why decentralizing the port operations across the country, including strategic seaports like Calabar, Onne, Warri, remaining a persistent challenge, what are those systemic reforms, what are those infrastructural investments that are necessary to make this decentralization a reality?
Shaitan, I'll tell you what, well, one of the reasons why house rent has been skyrocketing in Lagos, which also contributes to inflation that you have in Lagos, is because demand is higher than supply of houses in Lagos. Lagos is creating, there isn't enough infrastructure to accommodate the population. And that's because you've centralized the entire Nigerian economy. The contribution of Lagos to real GDP is 23%. Lagos State's factor IGRA ratio is 22% to 78%, which means 78% IGR, 22% FAC. Lagos State generates 26% equivalent. Lagos generates revenues equal to what 26 states in Nigeria generates. 26 states in Nigeria, which means Lagos is the most viable economy. Okay? If you want to decentralize port operations, I'll give you an example. The proposed capex for the Ibom Deep Seaport is $4.6 billion. The share capital contribution of the federal government is about $920 million. The capital contribution of the Akwa Ibom State government is about $920 million. The capital contribution of the private sector investor, which was Bolore, that got a 34-year concession for the ports to build, operate, and manage, is $2.7 billion. How do you raise financing for the project? Afrexim will gladly put up counterparty funding for this Akwa Ibom State government. Akwa Ibom State government can go to the debt capital markets and raise a state government bond to finance its own share. Akwa Ibom State government has a lot of liquidity because it has 13% derivation. It has a huge share from FAC because it's an oil-producing state. The federal government can also get Afrexim to finance its own side of the capital contribution for the project. These are the kind of projects that the government is supposed to be borrowing for, not to borrow to refinance existing debts, or to borrow to pay salaries, or to borrow to fund the expensive lives of politicians in Abuja. You invest in capital projects that will generate revenue and create jobs for the people and improve their standard of living. So if you're asking me how we can decentralize port operations, I'm giving you a practical example of a seaport in the Eastern Maritime Corridor that can improve trade and can help to decongest Lagos. The Akwa Ibom Deep Seaport, by the way, has a shore to sea that is 16 kilometers. It's the shortest distance to deep sea in the whole of Nigeria. Shorter than Lagos, shorter than what you have in Lekki, shorter than Apapa, shorter than Tinkan, shorter than the proposed Badagry Deep Seaport. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what. With the tension in the Middle East, you saw what happened to the aircraft, the Azerbaijan aircraft that flew through the Black Sea and was shot down by Russian defense missile. The Black Sea is close to maritime operations. The Suez Canal is also closed. A report came out last week that says Egypt has lost $7 billion in 2024 because of the issues in the Middle East, because of Yemeni terrorists, because of Iranian militias that are causing havoc to commercial vessels. Vessels that are coming from Southeast Asia are diverting all through the Cape of Good Hope down to South Africa. And then they turn back either into Western Europe, to South America, or to North America. In fact, Afrexim, early this year and late last year, commissioned a study, an internal study, to find the number of bunkering hubs in South Africa. Bunkering hubs are basically like terminals within ports that helps you to refuel and repair ships. They didn't find enough bunkering. I think there are maybe 2 operational bunkering hubs in the whole of that eastern down to the southern hemisphere of South Africa, of Africa. Now, if that Akwa Ibom Deep Sea Port is allowed to operate, you can basically build a bunkering hub into it for ships that come through the southern maritime flank, South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, to sail all the way to Nigeria, refill, do any repair or maintenance before they proceed on their onward journeys to Western Europe or to North America. The problem we have in Nigeria is that we don't have foresight. We bicker over the most mundane issues that doesn't affect the long-term prosperity and growth of the economy. The national debate is weak, it's shallow. There are critical issues we have to handle, and seaport operations is one of them, because you have governors going around telling you, oh, Kogi State got an approval to build an airport. An airport is not as consequential to an economy as a seaport. And if we don't tackle critical infrastructure, we're only going to keep dreaming and wishing.
All right, Kevin, I get your point very clearly. But then when you say that the economy, on account of the argument that you are making, that the economy appears skewed in favor of Lagos, I wonder how this can possibly be the fault of the Lagos city boy who happens to be the president at this time. He's just been there for 18 months, as you are aware. Same president has put out 4 different bills that clearly will reduce. Part of it is that the amount of VAT returns that comes to Lagos and to Rivers State will reduce drastically. And so you can't, I'm not so sure of how fair the assertion will be to say that this president probably prefers Lagos to continue to be the dominant economic factor in Nigeria, even though there won't be anything bad if Lagos can maintain, its dominance. But then, my point, therefore, my question to you is, what didn't the predecessors of the president, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, what didn't they see that you now want Tinubu to see and to implement? And how do you think that the new Ministry of Blue Economy can come in to change some of the dynamics in favor of the decentralization that you're talking about?
Steve, 2 truths can exist at the same time, okay? I commend Mr. President for starting out and appointing Taiwo Oyedele, fantastic pick for that role as chairman of Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reform. Like I said earlier, it's the most consequential set of reforms that Nigeria has had since independence, okay? On the so-called VAT attribution, I think I've always advocated for fiscal federalism in Nigeria. And I think that the issue on derivation, taking 60% in attribution for VAT is the way to go. Is also very important for Nigerians who are against the bill to note that the FG has stepped down 5% of the stake from 15% to 10%, okay? The alternative to not allowing these tax bills go through, especially on VAT, is that the governors are going to get to the Supreme Court. They're at appeal court, I think. And if these bills don't go through, for example, I'm hoping that doesn't happen, right? You're going to have every state implement a sales tax, which is going to be a chaos, like Rivers State and Lagos State had proposed when they sued the federal government of Nigeria under former President Muhammadu Buhari, okay? On the issue of the port operations, look, it is suspicious that Onne is designated as E&P and is only meant for oil and gas cargoes. And Calabar is not functioning, considering that Calabar was the first deep sea port in Nigeria. And Cross River was the first federal capital of Nigeria. It's suspicious that the process for seaport building and development is crossed ICRC, the Concession Regulatory Commission in Abuja, and the government has gone mute. Look, if you want to build a seaport, MPA needs to be at the forefront. The Minister of Marine and Blue Economy and the MPA, they need to be at the forefront of it. The state government alone can't make it happen. Because you need the federal government to give a seal of approval and validation to the investor that is going to take up the 60% contribution in the building of the seaport. If the federal government doesn't endorse and support it, the investor will not bring their money because the federal government will give guarantee to the project like it did for Lekki Deep Sea Port. So I find it suspicious that Calabar, they've refused to raise the channel draft, despite the fact that there's been an out-of-court settlement. You've gone cold on Akwa Ibom. Warri is not functioning. Onne is not competitive because it's only meant for oil and gas cargoes. And all of a sudden, Lagos Deep Sea Port is alive, is working. And then the minister is talking about doing Badagry Deep Sea Port. Is Lagos the only state in Nigeria? Lagos, look, if you speak to business people in Northeast, in North Central, yeah, they will tell you that they will prefer the Eastern Maritime Corridor, the Eastern Maritime Flank, because it's shorter for them, it's better for them than Lagos. So is there a fear that if Akwa Ibom Deep Sea Port comes alive, there's going to be a diversion of traffic, of cargoes from Lagos to Uyo? Is that the fear? Why is the government not on it? If the president is serious and he means what he says, when he says he wants to revitalize the economy and build a $1 trillion economy, he should be at the forefront leading the charge to ensure that the seaport building and development starts. Why is he not talking about it? Why have they gone cold on it? Because definitely I can assure you that it's not the state government that is not making effort. As a matter of fact, the person leading the Akwa Ibom State team on development of the Ibom Deep Seaport is the distinguished maritime lawyer, Mrs. Umfam Usoro, who happens to be the first DG of NIMASA. Obasanjo appointed her as the first DG of NIMASA in 2006. She's a distinguished maritime lawyer that has over 30 years of experience. So why is the government cold on Ibom Deep Seaport? And it's talking about Badagry, when Lagos already has 3 functioning seaports. And the Lagosians are complaining about traffic and how congested things are. Look, see, let me tell you, there are 3 major factors that determine where companies site their operations: access to ports, access to raw materials, access to off-takers. If you build infrastructure for seaports in the Eastern Maritime Corridor, you have access to ports, you have access to raw materials that, for example, you need to import. Yeah? You have 2 out of 3. Companies will move. Companies move to areas and geographies that has infrastructure to support and favor their business. That's how they make decisions on FID.
Kevin, you have highlighted a lot of points here, which a lot of people would, agree with. And, you've talked about the fact that, the Tinubu administration cannot claim to be progressive or tout renewed hope yet to restrict the maritime operations to the western flank. But, people would say, and I've heard that, nothing stops anyone from establishing a deep sea port in any region. And but like you have just rightly said, that, the seaport is on an exclusive legislative list and that the federal government has to be a part of. I'd love for you to debunk that claim even further, because I have seen reports saying that, people can go ahead and, build seaports in any region. And I've also seen a report that the private sector involved with the Ibom Deep Seaport, which is, I believe, MSC, has taken over concession and has revalidated, but cannot move forward because, like you said, the MPA is not saying anything about the 40%. I'd love for you to, elaborate on that point, especially that report.
Oji, it's a very important question you asked, and thank you for asking this question. So, the alternative to it, if states could just go ahead and build seaports, you might have maybe 4 or 5 different seaports in the Eastern Maritime Corridor by now. That's not possible. You can't do it. Okay? Just like Dangote built a refinery and he needs all kinds of approvals from regulators, NEBZA for the free trade zone status that he has, from NMDPRA for who is his primary regulator because he's in midstream, and supplying the downstream. And he needed the support of the government in providing crude oil feedstock, which they've not, been very great at. Most of those crude oil has been tied to all kinds of crude oil swaps and loans that NNPC is finding difficult to explain to Nigerians. Now, for seaport operations, you need the government to back you, because you have 40% of counterparty contribution that the federal government and the state government has to put up. I mentioned earlier that based on the capex that is scheduled for this project, $4.6 billion, the federal government is supposed to contribute $920 million. If they don't contribute their share, then they should excuse themselves from the process and say, we're giving 80% to the private sector investor and 20% to the state. We'll support you with all regulatory approvals to go ahead with the operation. If they refuse, then it means the process will be stalled. So contrary to what people are saying on, the state government should go ahead and source for investors, no, that's not the way it works. You actually need regulatory approvals, and you need the federal government to contribute its own share to the project, which is 20%. If the federal government refuses to contribute its own share to the project, then it should excuse itself from the process and allocate 80% to the private investor and 20% to the state. The state has several vehicles it can use to raise financing for this project. I mentioned earlier, Afro-Exim will be glad to support this project, considering Afro-Exim provided $3.45 billion for the building of the Bakassi Deep Seaport that the Cross River State Government is championing. Okay? The state government can also issue a state government bond to raise a part of that financing for it. This is the most critical project. This is the most critical project for Akwa Ibom State. And it's a very important project for the entire Southeast, South-South, North-Central, and Northeast. For mostly half of the entire country. So I'm shocked that the government is not at the forefront pushing this. It's very surprising. Because it makes so much economic sense that if the government is not pushing it and they've kept mute and gone cold, then there is another agenda on the table.
Let's move the conversation ahead. Let's talk about, as the economist that you are, the economic justification for the tax reforms is something that has come up over and over again, even during President Bola Tinubu's media chat that happened earlier this week, where he spoke about, this proposed series of sweeping tax reforms aimed at increasing government revenue. However, critics continue to argue that this heavy reliance on taxes could overburdening already, struggling citizens and businesses. Of course, there is the aspect that commiserates for small and medium businesses and those that earn lower than 1 million naira and lower. But from an economic perspective, do you believe that focusing on this tax administration is the best route to generating a revenue, or does this suggest a lack of strategic diversification in the country's revenue generation plans? We saw the budget come out. We still have a chunk of that budget still being used to service our debts. What other alternative approaches? I mean, we've already touched on, the seaports and what that could do in diversifying as well. But what other approaches could complement or, complement this strategy as well?
So, a very important question you asked. Like I said earlier, I have to commend the president on this. I said two things can coexist at the same time. This is the most consequential reforms that Nigeria has ever had. And I said also that Taiwo Oyedele is a fantastic pick to have led and currently leading. His temperament to take all the questions and all the dissent and disagreements over it is very crucial to the success of the tax reform bills. Look, Nigeria has one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios in sub-Saharan Africa. Is underperforming its peers. Okay, and the failure of NNPC to remit revenues to the federal government. In 2014, Sheitan, NNPC, you had annualized crude oil fiscalized production of about 800 million barrels. Okay, they were remitting $3 billion to CBN every month. In 2024, annualized crude oil fiscal production is 537 million barrels. NNPC is remitting less than $300 million to CBN every month. That's a drop of 90% in liquidity to the central bank that it needs for balance of payment. And you can see that drop of 90% in remittance of revenues has also translated to a drop of 90% in the value of your currency over the same intervening period. So, Shaitan, quick maths. If you drop from 800 million barrels to 537 million barrels, how have you dropped? That drop is not up to 50% in terms of crude oil production, which is 2.1 million barrels per day, basically it's about 1.45. How have you dropped from remitting $3 billion a month to less than $300 million a month? There's a disconnect. And that's why I said you need an audit of NNPC to find out why that disconnect is and who is lying, okay? The fact that you're not remitting revenues to the government means that your fiscal deficit, and Fitch had just come out. I think Fitch ratings came out yesterday to say that Nigeria has to tackle the fiscal deficit reduction framework in its budget expenditure, in its budget proposals. Else, of course, they are going to revise Nigeria's credit rating down, and it's going to affect the different layers of the economy. Because if you have a high fiscal deficit, it means that you're going to continuously and perennially have budget underperformance. It also means that you're going to continuously borrow more money. Debt servicing in the 2025 budget is over 15 trillion, about 15.8 trillion of about 47.9 trillion. Debt servicing alone. The government is proposing to borrow about 13 trillion naira to fund the budget. It's not sustainable. So the tax reform bill, contrary to what people believe about it raising taxes, it's not going to raise taxes. As a matter of fact, the poorest and most vulnerable Nigerians who own businesses, the limit or cap on which they are taxed has been raised from 25 million. So people who are excluded from paying taxes, small businesses, that cap has been raised from 25 million to 50 million. There's a global minimum tax that has been applied for large corporations. Of course, the VAT system has been changed on derivation, on equity of states and on population. 60% for derivation, which is the most contentious issue. Yeah. Usually when we talk about this bill, there's the temptation to believe that it's only focused on tax reform, but there's a lot of work that has gone also into fiscal reforms. The bill has strengthened local government autonomy and the structure, for example, of ensuring that local government chairmen present a budget to the councillors or ESCOs or the equivalent of House of Assembly for local government. Yeah, there's a whole fiscal framework that has been designed for local government. They present the budget, they get FAC allocation directly from federation accounts. There's a framework for which they have to get SEC approval if they want to raise municipal bonds or which is the equivalent of state government bonds to finance deficits in their budget framework. So it's actually going to strengthen government to the people. This bill has also revised all the nuisance taxes that are over 62. For Rivers State alone has about 92 nuisance taxes. All kinds of state and local government levies that disrupts the ease of business. This bill is going to help to accelerate the ease of doing business in Nigeria by reducing nuisance taxes from 62 to about 8. It aligns revenue collection from over 60 revenue generating agencies, ROGAs, to a central collection authority, which will be the Nigerian Revenue Service, which will increase the amount of revenue that the government gets and reduce the imperative for us to borrow more money. And I'll tell you what, Sheita, the revenue underperformance of the government was the reason, because of the failure of NNPC, was the reason why the past 2 CBN governors, for example, abused Section 38 of the CBN Act of 2007, which was Ways and Means, whereby he created money that didn't exist into the system. He hiked CRR from 14%, where he met it in 2014, and took it up to over 30%. The current CBN governor has taken cash reserve ratio to 50%. So basically, CRR was a means, cash reserve ratio was a means through which the central bank regulates the supply of money in the banking system. But the past CBN governor took that money to finance deficits in the budget. That was not enough. He created and printed money that didn't exist, and that led to devaluation of the currency. Okay, so if you have more revenue for the government, there will be less imperative to borrow, there will be less imperative to abuse Ways and Means as outlined in Section 38 of the CBN Act, which is good for the economy. So I don't subscribe to the rumors of people who, both the mischievous ones that are working for people who don't want the bill to pass, and the people who are genuinely concerned that the tax reform bill is going to end up increasing taxes for Nigerians. I don't. I think it's actually good for the economy, and it's the most strategic and consequential reforms that Nigeria has seen since independence in 1960.
All right. Okay, Kevin, Emmanuel, thank you so very much. Good words on the tax reform bills and, of course, on the advocacy for the decentralization of the port system in Nigeria. We want to thank you for joining us on the morning show today. Thank you indeed, Kevin.